Am I the a-hole for telling my son I was disappointed after he and his wife lied about my grandson's birth date? My son, 23, and his wife just had a baby boy. Everyone is overjoyed and excited, but there have been some issues that has risen recently. When my daughter-in-law was pregnant, I suggested that I host a welcoming party for my grandson right after she got discharged from the hospital. I've made arrangements and even emptied a room for them to stay, but for some reason she was against it and said she'd rather spend the first few weeks at home with her newborn. Not only that, but she said no to the welcoming party. My husband and I talked to my son and he said we'll see. But just a couple days ago, we found out that my daughter-in-law had given birth 2 weeks ago, and no one knew about it. My nephew told me and I immediately called my son, and he confirmed it. He and his wife lied, then hid the date of birth from the family. I told him this was not acceptable, lying just because they didn't want a welcoming party and love and support being given from the family. I told him I was disappointed because 1, he ruined our welcoming for our grandbaby, and also I invited family members and they're all rightfully disappointed as well. He said it was his last resort after I kept pushing and made his wife uncomfortable, but that was not appreciated because we were just trying to celebrate the new family member in a proper manner. We had an argument, and he ended a call upon saying I ruined his joy for his newborn. My husband started texting him since he stopped replying to our phone calls, and I was threatening to block my nephew for tattling. But I think that my nephew was decent enough to inform the family. Otherwise, God knows how long my son and his wife were going to hide their son just to keep us at arm's length. We've always been kind and welcoming to my daughter-in-law and her family, so I don't know why she would do this and disrespect the family like that. On the other hand, some family members see it as a justified action because we insisted on a party. P.S. Some folks, I'd appreciate it if you leave my nephew, male 24, out of this conflict, because he's not part of it. Now for the top comments. Welcoming party is a nice way of saying exposing a newborn to all sorts of disease during a pandemic. You're the a-hole, always and forever. You are not entitled to put this child in danger. Edit. The people talking about the danger to and exhaustion of the mother are 1,000,000% right. I'm sorry for not including it. Honestly, where I'm from, you don't visit a baby until it is past 2 weeks, not to give it or the mother any disease regardless of the plague. Even 2 weeks is when you're really close, like a close cousin. For real. My mother-in-law forced a surprise welcoming party on us, but she at least had a basic decency to wait 2 weeks. It was still hell though. Edit. For those asking, no, a welcoming party is not actually a real thing. Everybody but her called it a baby shower. Only her family, who I had never met, was invited. I say hell because I was still bleeding heavily, had a tear in my labia, my breasts were excruciating basketballs, hadn't slept in 2 weeks and spent most of the time alone in a bedroom trying to figure out breastfeeding. You're the a-hole. It's not about you. Also, she was against it and said she'd rather spend the first few weeks at home with her newborn. Not only that, but she said no to the welcoming party. My husband and I talked to my son and he said we'll see. Mom said no. So you went behind her back to your son, which is disrespectful and insensitive to her wishes. And he clearly wasn't on board either. It sounds like they felt pressured into lying about it after you were so insistent on a party. Also again, he ruined our welcoming for our grandbaby. Wrong. You ruined the welcoming for him and his wife. You should feel horrible for that, and for putting them in that position to begin with. They obviously pushed it so hard that son and daughter-in-law were convinced they would just be there waiting at the house when they got home from the hospital. Opie needs to work on respecting boundaries if she ever wants to have a close relationship with her grandson, and will have to get used to a lot of disappointment if they continue their a-hole behavior. 100% and Opie, you're the a-hole. I'm a newly postpartum mom, and my mother-in-law boundaries stumped and my baby does to death. So much that we haven't asked her over in 4+ weeks and she gets very limited information. We also didn't tell anyone we were in the hospital the first day. It was glorious to concentrate on the task at hand without people constantly berating us. Babies don't belong to grandparents and you can't make demands / act entitled to someone else's child, or treat people however you want. Just because you want something or think it should be a certain way doesn't make it true. You'd be wise to love them the way they're asking to be loved and respect some boundaries. Next story is titled, Am I the a-hole for being hostile and rude to my sister's boyfriend over a joke he told my wife? My sister, 26, brought her new boyfriend, 30, over to our parents' house to meet him for the first time. My wife and I came as well. We met the dude. He seemed okay-ish at first, but he then started asking weird and personal questions. My wife had breast cancer and got a single mastectomy last year. She told the story to my sister's boyfriend and he was like, "Oh." Then he stared at my wife briefly, then playfully said, "Without even asking, I can pretty much tell which one got the blow." We were floored. My wife could barely keep a straight face, and she lied so she could leave the table because she was literally about to tear up. I just looked at the dude and said, "Are you serious?" And he said, "What? I was just joking, bro." I started asking him to explain the joke to me, and he just stared. I asked him again to explain it to me in details, but still got no answer. My sister asked me to stop because clearly he got uncomfortable, but I insisted he explain the joke to me because clearly my wife and I didn't get it. Things got awkward with him avoiding eye contact while I just stared at him the entire time. I still insisted. I'd asked him to explain the joke right there and then, but seconds later he said he needed to step outside to make a phone call. Turns out he got in his car and left. My sister had a meltdown screaming and berating me for how I treated her boyfriend, calling me hostile with anger issues to scare her boyfriend out of our parents' house. I told her he was overstepping and made my wife uncomfortable to the point of crying. She actually called my wife such a princess and said she is soft and cannot take some teasing. I had an argument with her and my parents intervened. I just took my wife and left. My dad called me later and said that he understood how hurt my wife felt. But my sister's boyfriend was visiting for the first time and I showed hostility and aggression instead of just ignoring him. He encouraged me to reach out to him and my sister later and talk it out, but I declined. Am I the a-hole? Edit. My sister and my wife don't have a history, but my sister tends to see the worst in people. When my wife announced her diagnosis, my sister actually thought she was faking because the family no longer brought up my wife's miscarriage months prior. I thought that was out of line and she apologized for it and we moved on. But my sister thinks that the only bad trait she sees in her boyfriend is a smoking habit. She says that otherwise he's perfect. Shaking my freaking head. Not stay home. Congratulations, you handled the situation perfectly. You simply asked the a-hole to explain himself. He couldn't. He doubled down. He chose not to apologize, which could have diffused the whole situation. What? I was just joking, bro. This is always code for I'm an a-hole, but I'm going to let myself off the hook. It's right up there with I'm not racist, but... And I'm just being brutally honest. 100% agreed. The just a joke bro crowd is never funny. Opie's insistence that he explained the joke is something I tend to do when confronted with that as well, and the reaction he got from the boyfriend is completely expected. Sister should be ashamed of both her taste in men and her attitude towards Opie's wife. Opie's family clearly enables her behavior since he got the whole "don't rock the boat" speech from dad. Opie's not a-hole, and frankly my hero for how he stood up for his wife. Not a-hole. What's so hostile about asking him to explain his stupid freaking joke? Some people think that anything less than fawning over their jokes is aggressive. I noticed it a lot when I started asking my family, "Oh, I don't understand a joke. Can you explain it to me?" Well, they'd make racist comments and say they were jokes. Nah, jokes are funny and you're not being funny, just a jerk. Me not laughing at them was considered rude, and asking them to explain how racism is hilarious was aggressive. But this is only called aggressive by the people who were the original a-holes, or those who enable a-holery. It's a perfect response and very helpful for weeding a-holes from your life. Well done. Not a-hole, and I honestly commend your restraint. Not sure I could have held back as much as you did in similar circumstances. Sometimes people don't have anger issues. They just have wholly valid anger. Normally, I do my best to keep calm and collected. It takes huge amounts of effort to get a reaction out of me. It's just how I am, and unfortunately people do try to test me oftentimes. Next story. Am I the a-hole for banning mother-in-law from being around my two underage kids after she said she should have my stepdaughter removed by CPS? I have a stepdaughter, Ava, 26, and two bio daughters, Claire, 16, and Emily, 14. I really did my best to bond with Ava, but she just wasn't into it. We did family therapy, individual therapy, but Ava was never okay with the idea of having step-parents. Mom was also remarried. She was a good kid and just kept to herself. Ava's getting married and mother-in-law's freaking out because Ava doesn't want a lot of post pictures. Ava really just wants pictures with a groom and to skip the family pictures. I didn't hear this conversation, but apparently Ava told mother-in-law that she would take pictures with her and father-in-law, but she had been dreading the big family pictures because she hates pretending she has two families when really she just didn't have one. My husband gently confronted Ava when mother-in-law told him what she said, and Ava said he didn't do anything wrong, but she just hates pretending we are a real family. That was hard on him, and he has been beating himself up over it. Mother-in-law won't let go of it, and has been crying about how she didn't know how bad it was for Ava, and she should have saved her. Mother-in-law recently burst into tears very dramatically in front of my husband, Claire, and Emily, and said she should have called CPS on us and gotten custody of Ava. We demanded to know what was CPS worthy, and she said she could have made something up, but if Ava was so unhappy, she should have been removed. I asked her if she would really lie to CPS, and she said yes, and that Ava probably would have been a good actress and could have convinced them. I was freaked out by this conversation. I decided if she really thinks that is okay, I don't want her around Claire and Emily. My husband is torn. The kids don't care either way, but mother-in-law says I'm dramatic and insane, and Ava told her dad that I can do whatever I want. But if mother-in-law can't be around them, the four of us can be the ones to not come to the wedding. I actually didn't mind her being around them at the wedding. It meant more she is banned from our house and we won't be going to any family events. My husband is now upset and feels I overreacted. Now for the comments. Not stay home. Mother-in-law is nuts and having a meltdown about somebody else's wedding. If she's threatening false CPS reports, she doesn't need to be anywhere near your family. Not to mention mother-in-law is delusional to think that her getting custody of Ava would have magically fixed all of the problems she perceived. Like if only she'd been the one to have custody, then Ava would want to take big family photos. She's throwing an overdramatic temper tantrum with very real and consequential threats, and I don't blame Opie for not wanting that anywhere near her family. Not stay home, but that is not a problem here. Husband being a freaking pushover is. What your mother-in-law said is completely inappropriate, and your husband should see it as what it was, a threat to your family. If he can't see that, then it is maybe worth reevaluating your relationship with him. Not stay home, but your husband should have A, recorded that crap, and B, gone no contact. If my mother-in-law threatened my kids like that and my spouse was that spineless, it would be insta-divorce and seeking a restraining order against the mother-in-law. Like I would get in the car and drive to a shark of a lawyer. Not stay home. You're being dramatic and insane? She's the one saying she should have lied to CPS, and acting like that would have been a reasonable thing to do. Threatening your daughter-in-law with CPS, even retroactively, is the nuclear bomb in family relationships like this. Also, I personally find it morally repugnant to use an agency that exists to protect children in legitimate situations of neglect and mistreatment to manipulate or enact revenge on someone else. That's pretty much fraud and theft of those resources. That is what she's casually suggesting was the right thing to do here, which is horrifying. I wouldn't want someone like that around my kids either. Now for the last story. Am I the a-hole for telling him his dog is absolutely destroying me and my kids' quality of life? My fiancé just got a dog about 2 years ago that has made me and my kids hate being home. That's coming from people who love dogs, including the multiple dog foster home over the years. This dog is untrainable. She has been in behavioral training and other basic training for a year and a half, and there has been zero change in her behavior at all. She whines constantly, nips at your face to get your attention and draws blood damn near every single time, rips food from your hands, bites your ears while you are trying to drive because she is pissed that you won't let her sit in your lap, gets in the garbage and will snarl at you if you reprimand her, etc. The only thing she's actually sticking with on the training is going to the bathroom outdoors. To say I'm done is an understatement. She's a small dog, so this is unnecessary, but she truly hurts people, nipping and digging constantly. 2 weeks ago, I completely freaking lost it after multiple conversations with my fiancé about the dog. He insisted on bringing her with us to the store one day because this dog is basically his pride and joy and cannot see any wrongdoings that she's actually doing. So he insists on bringing her, and while driving she jumped in my lap and gutted me. Complete loss of breath, dug the heck out of my stomach, etc. Not even 10 minutes later, she reaches up and rips my Slim Jim out of my mouth. I flipped out and told him he had until the end of the month to find her somewhere else to go, because I've had it and she's no longer welcome at my home. My fiancé keeps saying he will just try harder on training despite us bending backwards as it is, spending over $12,000 in training alone for it to do absolutely nothing. Wasting 3 days a week to go to training with her because it's important, but nope. So anyways, last night my daughter and I finished a project we had been working on for months. We wove a 12 by 12 blanket together made up of our old shirts and blankets. We hung it up in the garage to dry the glue around the seams. My fiancé brought the dog out and ended up hanging out in the garage with his buddy Chris. And like 15 minutes later, he comes inside apologizing because this animal destroyed at least 4 feet of this blanket we just finished. At this point, I told him I have never in my life hated an animal the way I hate this dog. And she has completely destroyed me and my kids' quality of life, and I'm done. Either he gets rid of the dog or he leaves with her. Those are the only 2 options at this point. He says I'm an a-hole for allowing a dog to ruin my life, and says if I would just calm down then I would see she isn't that bad. Am I the a-hole? Not the a-hole. Any dog who has been through $12,000 worth of training and still bites people is a dog that doesn't belong living with people who aren't absolute pet experts. I have to agree with this comment. I'm just stunned that it hasn't gotten better. I mean, 12,000 is a lot of training hours. Except training only works if it's reinforced at home, which I very much doubt the man in question is doing. This, training classes aren't magic. The dog isn't going to suddenly have an epiphany that, oh, this is what they want me to do at home. You have to continue what they're learning at home. Not stay home. The dog probably has potential, but your fiancé's refusal to see her behavior as problematic has made her a menace. Really, it's not the dog that's ruined your quality of life. It's the fiancé for his refusal to be consistent with training.